As Pakistan reels from weeks of unprecedented and devastating flash floods, on Monday it began to tally up the hits to its economy. The full extent of the damage remains to be seen as authorities wait for water levels to recede. Yet according to the country's planning minister, Ashan Iqbal, early estimates showed they were already deep in the red.
I think it's going to be huge. So far, a very early preliminary estimate is that it is higher than $10 billion. My hunch is that this is going to be 2 to 3 times higher than what we are estimating.
Iqbal said almost half of the country's cotton crops had been washed away by historic rains, a serious blow to a country whose textile sector makes up a majority of what it sells abroad. Meanwhile, severe damage to other crops caused food prices to shoot up. The floods also wiped out infrastructure around the country, including a major bridge in northern Pakistan, which wound up almost completely cut off from the rest of the country. One resident, Ali Jan, described how quickly the situation turned dire.
It was raining, but not heavily. Suddenly, the outer wall of the compound collapsed and water gushed in. We barely managed to save ourselves. By the time the women were leaving the house, the water had become almost waist deep. We evacuated the women and the cattle. The rest is there for you to see.
Many like Jan are now reckoning with the aftermath of what the country's climate change minister called a climate-induced humanitarian disaster of epic proportions. At least 1,000 people have been killed in recent weeks, with more than 33 million people affected, over 15% of Pakistan's population.
Right now, 1/3 of Pakistan is underwater and 33 million are affected. Please tell me how that is not catastrophic. That is the size of a small country. Many are still in place where we can't reach them. I think after 8 weeks of unrelenting monsoon torrential downpours, we now have the river Indus from the Kabul side bursting forth, and we have a perfect storm between the north and the south. Our helicopters are having trouble finding dry land in the south, in Balochistan, for instance, as to where to drop goods. There are many harrowing and heartbreaking scenes of trauma and distress. This is a huge humanitarian disaster, and I would call it quite apocalyptic. But metal roads have been ripped apart, 146 bridges, some built back after the great 2010 super flood, have been, they've all broken down, not the rickety ones we're seeing, huge, steel bridges built much higher, built back better after 2010, all taken down. So yes, we're going to need a lot of work to do. The crop in Sindh is destroyed, which is half our bread basket. The water is just standing there. There's no way crops can grow on it. So it's a multi-dimensional, literally, it's a national security disaster for Pakistan, and it's going to cause a series of long-term and medium-term repercussions. Our cities, our villages, our crops, our people, the migrations pressing on the cities, all these will have multiple impacts that, that really are brought upon by climate shocks.
Climate knows no borders, and its effects can be disproportionately felt certainly across the global south because we're closer to the equator. So when you see low pressure systems coming from the Bay of Bengal, they hit us before anyone else. So we're on the front line of a global crisis.